Story 1. Being completely comfortable with letting your children spend a few hours outside with nothing more than 2 pounds and their bicycle. Expecting them to return home just in time for dinner without any doubt or worry. Story 2. Our station wagon had pop-up, rear-facing seats in the trunk. I haven't seen those in a long time. A friend showed me a video of her being put to bed as a baby, and the crib was absolutely filled with items. Blankets, toys, bumpers, mirrors, pillows, and decorations. Story 3. I used to walk in the woods all the time when I was a kid. I brought hedge clippers to trim thorny vines and a rusty axe to create paths. This was before I turned 10, and I'm not sure any kid would do that now. Story 4. In the 1990s, riding in the back of a pickup truck without seatbelts, staying home alone at 9 or 10 years old, wandering around the neighborhood without adult supervision, and cooking on the stove as a little kid were normal experiences for me. I lived in a rural area, and some of these activities were considered unorthodox at the time, but they felt normal to me. Story 5. When I was in elementary school, my friends and I would go to the park and play frequently without any parents or supervision. Story 6. Uncle let us explore Yosemite by ourselves. My cousin and I instantly got lost. It took us a few hours of wandering on and off trails and drinking from streams to find the rest of our group. Story 7. 10 feet tall, all metal slides, just a flat sheet with tubular poles on each side. The only guards were the bent tubes at the top platform. If you didn't catch your back skin on it, which burned in the sun, you would gain enough speed to launch off the end. If you launched, you either landed skidding or were quick enough to get your feet down. Story 8. Unrestricted internet access put me at risk of blackmail. I narrowly avoided a dangerous situation, but I still carry lifelong trauma. Story 9. I used to walk from school to the library every day around noon to hang out with other teenagers. We would walk around town for hours until my mom finished work to pick me up. Story 10. I don't believe they spray anymore, but we played kick the can under the cover of the pesticide cloud when they sprayed for mosquitoes. Story 11. My siblings and I spent hours swimming in the hot sun without any sunscreen during the summer. In the 1980s, my parents never informed us about the dangers of the sun's rays. Story 12. Jarts, no seatbelts in cars, and ashtrays on buses, planes, and in every automobile. Watching news about Vietnam, starving children in Biafra, and the crying Indian competing to traumatize me. Story 13. Walking to school. Riding in the bed of a truck without being secured. Riding a bike without a helmet. Riding in a car without a seatbelt. Story 14. I grew up in the late 1970s and 1980s, so it seems like just about anything. A few things come to mind. I grew up on a small farm with horses and other animals. My parents would let me go outside and do whatever, which often meant getting into the runs with the horses and playing around. I never got hurt. We would also ride our dirt bikes without any parental supervision. We had a frightening three-wheeler, which was a green Honda. It was fun to ride, as it had such big tires. I rode a lot in the back of trucks. Even more frightening, when we went to horse shows, we had a gooseneck trailer with a dressing room at the front, where we would ride. There were no seats and certainly no seat belts. Do those old station wagons count, where you could ride facing backward in the very back seat? I would often sleep on the floor of our van while we drove long distances. My parents would put the armrests down on their Cadillac and have me sit on top of them. I was right between them, but like before, there was no seat belt. I probably have more memories, but that's what comes to mind right now. Story 15. Going out without informing our parents about our destination and companions. There were no seatbelts in cars. Story 16. My siblings and I, along with other neighborhood kids, would play chicken with the big coal trains and run from the police when they were called. Looking back now, I cannot believe no one got hurt or caught. They have built fences to keep people away from the tracks now, thankfully. Story 17. We played a dodgeball game we created, where all the kids from my grade climbed on top of high monkey bars, which were at least 5 feet high. The person who was it would kick a soccer ball at us. We would clamber over each other to avoid getting hit or knocked down. Many times, kids fell from heights of over 5 feet to the dirt playground. No one ever got seriously hurt, but it was surprising how the teacher would just walk by, ask how the game was going, and then move on. Story 18. We would get drunk and rollerblade without helmets, hanging on to passing cars while going down the steepest hill in town. I used to hitchhike regularly. Story 19. I was left home alone quite a bit from a young age, around 5, I believe. I became quite an independent child from having to do many things on my own for so long. My oldest child is almost at that age, and there is no way I would let them be home alone. I cannot even trust them in the next room by themselves for 10 minutes without causing chaos. Story 20. Riding in cars without seatbelts. Riding bicycles without helmets. Smoking cigarettes in front of children and in enclosed spaces. I recently realized my mother was pregnant with me before it was recommended that people refrain from smoking and drinking alcohol during pregnancy. She was not the type of person who would abstain for the benefit of a child. Story 21. I believe fewer young children go out on their own in town. I used to ride my bike everywhere and return before dark. Story 22. I turned a hayloft into my bedroom and set up a crossbow range. That isn't even me mixing gunpowder and crushed road flares, packing them into ping pong balls, dipping them in wax and painting them with multiple coats of automotive paint. Story 23. In the 1960s, we had a Plymouth station wagon. When we visited my grandparents, my sister would sit in the front with my parents. The 3 oldest boys would have a seat, and my youngest brother would stand on the driveshaft hump the whole way. Nobody wore seat belts because they did not exist. The rear of the wagon was always full of luggage and various items my parents were bringing for my grandparents. Those were good times. Story 24. I regularly rode my bike 4 miles on the shoulder of the road along the state route to the neighboring town to see my friend. I still don't think it's unsafe, but it's a 45 miles per hour and 55 miles per hour speed zone, and you're in the shoulder. The large trucks used to scare me, though. It's not like they were any closer than the other traffic, but their size made it feel like I would be blown over in their wake. Story 25. Hiking alone, riding my 10-speed bike for miles to a friend's house, sledding, building 6-foot-deep forts in the desert and lighting them with candles, going to the park alone, swimming by myself, riding dirt bikes and riding horses. All these activities reminded me of my childhood. I remember coming home when the streetlights came on. Just because many of us had mothers at home back then didn't mean they wanted us underfoot. My younger brother and his friend did play with one of the guns. His friend thought it would be funny to shoot at his feet like in the cartoons of the day. My brother did get shot in the ankle and was lucky it wasn't much worse than that. Story 26. So many experiences. Riding in the back of pickups. Wandering everywhere without my mom knowing my whereabouts. Riding bikes without a helmet. Story 27. Lawn darts. We had a set and didn't think anything about playing with them. We knew not to throw them at each other, though. Story 28. Here is where my age comes into play. I used to bike and walk all over our small town at 9 to 10 years old. I think that is normal and fine. The chance of a child being a victim of a crime is lower than ever before. Story 29. Lawn darts. Spending time in the woods near my house with friends or on my own, usually equipped with pellet or BB guns and occasionally sneaking out with my .22 rifle. Riding bikes and performing stunts, such as using ramps to jump over a creek without any safety equipment. Not checking in between dawn and dusk. The list continues. Story 30. I have no idea where to start. Probably at birth, since we didn't even have a hospital. It was about an hour's drive to the hospital. From there, it gets strange. By 4, I was learning to shave, shoot firearms, and understand basic knife safety. By 7, I was carrying a fixed-blade knife and mastering archery. Riding horses was a bareback sport, and falling off was part of the lessons on how to land and stay on. There wasn't any holding reins while a child rode. The child held the mane, and the horse did what it wanted. My backyard was nature. Snakes, bees, bears, and anything that wanted to walk around. We didn't have swimming pools like today. We found swimming holes in rivers, ponds, or lakes and went swimming. Everyone worries about nudity today, but back then we would strip down and swim without thinking. I have no idea when I saw my first pair of breasts on a girl, but it was before my puberty. Even when we rode in cars, we didn't have seat belts. If we needed to go somewhere, we might hop in the back of a truck and ride. Since this was the countryside, the bed of a truck didn't always have walls or rails. Speaking of rails, we used to walk along the railroad tracks as well as the roads, which were equally traveled and at the same speeds. Story 31. We had this old pink bike that didn't have handlebars. All the kids had wrenched them back and forth until they snapped off, leaving a rusted sharp metal pole. This was the chicken bike. The street had a tall hill, and we would play chicken where one kid stood at the bottom and another rode the chicken bike down the hill fast with only that metal pole to steer. We were all aged 8 to 13. I'm surprised no one was seriously injured or at least came down with a nasty case of tetanus. Story 32. My family was very poor. When we finally had a vehicle, it was an old white van with no seats in the back. My parents put an old sofa in the back that we sat on whenever they drove around. It was unsafe back then, but I felt it was acceptable. Story 33. Shooting a big lawn dart with a metal tip into the air, hoping it would land somewhere far away. It's a good thing my mom imagined that scenario where I threw it vertically and stopped me before it happened. But all the kids were doing it. Story 34. No seatbelts, drunk parents driving, free reign for miles in a city suburb. Lawn darts with those drunk parents and their friends. We would ride in the camper top bed lying down, looking forward. We walked to and from school, made dinner, and saw our parents maybe at 10 p.m. when they got home. I took a bus downtown at 10 and walked around with friends. At 6, my mother would send me 5 blocks to the store across main streets to buy cigarettes. Story 35. A giant trampoline without a net in the yard was beside a wooden fence, followed by a road. We bounced for hours, and when our cousins visited, we double bounced each other off the sides. We threw balls at each other and chased each other in circles as fast as we could until we fell off. It was enjoyable but very dangerous from today's viewpoint. Story 36. Go to the neighborhood community center at 8 years old by myself after school to meet friends at the pool. Story 37. Cramming more than 5 kids in the back seat of a mid-sized sedan and having them share lap seatbelts, if they were required to wear them at all. Story 38. Riding in the bed of a truck was a thrilling experience. Even with a shell on, it felt risky. My dad would deliberately take corners quickly to jolt us around in the back, and we loved it. Story 39. Standing on the floor between my mother's legs in the front passenger seat of a 1969 Firebird. I used the oh-shit handle on the dash above the glove box as a teething ring. Neither she nor my father, who was driving, was wearing a seatbelt. 4 years later, that vehicle was totaled in a T-bone accident when someone pulled out in front of us. It was Father's Day. We were returning from fishing at the lake. I was around 4 to 6 years old. Still not wearing seatbelts, I reached into the back seat to get some candy from a bag, and it spilled all over the floor. Had my father not told me to pick it up, I probably would have been sitting normally in the front seat and thrown through the windshield. Instead, my torso was mostly in the back seat footwell over the transmission while my legs dangled into the front passenger seat. I flew forward, backward, and into the dash. My dad somehow held himself in the vehicle too, but completely twisted the steering wheel back around the steering column. Story 40. No seatbelts. A 3-year-old is standing in the back, straddling the center hump to look out of the front windshield. Story 41. When I was in kindergarten, I walked to and from school. In first grade, I walked to the playground with my younger brothers. It was almost half a mile away from the house, and the playground was not safe by today's standards. When I was about 5 or 6, I got a pocket knife that I carried with me. It was sharp. My brothers and I were left alone in the house when I was about 6. We were also left alone in the car while my mom shopped, with the windows down if it was hot. We rode in the back of the pickup truck, sitting on the wheel wells or standing behind the cab. We climbed trees frequently. In 3rd grade, I spent an entire day at a local carnival by myself. I threw darts at balloons and participated in various games and rides. I remember throwing that first dart and realizing that the game was rigged, so I didn't waste any more tickets on it. Generally, we were unsupervised a lot after age 5. This was in the 1970s. Story 42. Walking along the railroad tracks to the rock dike and crossing it to reach an island where we could hunt rabbits with our guns. Story 43. Our parents removed the seats from our van and placed a mattress in the back for us four children to play on. Story 44. Packing into a car like sardines, we kids would sit on the floor between the adults' legs. My aunt had a van, and when we all piled in, we would be rolling around in the space behind the back seat where you would normally put groceries. Story 45. I often took the bus home from school. The county bus is cheaper than the yellow buses. I would play a game called Human Crossroad because there was no crosswalk on my street until I reached high school. Story 46. I used to ride my bike with my friends all over town, even all the way to the next town. We would go to the grocery store and a convenience store for snacks. My town was pretty safe, so I guess it wasn't such a wild thing, but the store was just down the street from where we saw a guy get stabbed. I remember between the ages of 9 and 14, we would hang out all over town, but I have no memories of telling my parents where I was going. I asked my dad a while back why he let me do that, and he said he always knew where I was. But sometimes I wonder if that was true. Occasionally, we would ride our bikes to the high school and then add on a trip to the store. These were a couple of miles away from my house. Sometimes we would go down a little forest area right next to a river. It had a swing that we would play on, and one time the branch broke, causing my friend to fall into the freezing water. She was right next to the shoreline, so she was fine, but that could have been bad. Story 47. Sleeping in the rear window well of my dad's 1950s car during long road trips was a unique experience. The car had 7 of us sitting on old plastic seats. Without air conditioning, we were squashed together in our shorts and t-shirts, making our skin unpleasantly slippery from sweat. The window well became an escape to a special place, allowing for some solitude. There were no seatbelts, and safety was not a concern for anyone. Story 48. We rode our bikes all over town for hours. Our mothers had no idea where we were or how far we had gone. Story 49. Lying in the back window of the car, there was a ledge, and with 4 of us kids, the back seat was a little crowded. Lying in the back window was the coolest. Story 50. I had free reign of my grandparents' farm, and one of the things I enjoyed was climbing the ladder of a full grain silo and playing in the grain. Reading chilling stories of grain engulfment made me realize how dangerous that was. Story 51. We rode in the bed of a pickup truck down some questionable dirt roads and occasionally on proper roads as well. Having seen videos of that a few times as an adult, I have no idea how my parents allowed us to do that. They were usually very diligent about seatbelts and safety. Story 52. Throwing lawn darts straight up into the air and watching them land was a pastime for my brother and me. We stopped when one dart impaled an old broken clothes dryer that was sitting in the yard, going through the thick metal by about 2 inches. Story 53. Wandering around our neighborhood, playing with the kids who were nearby, going home only for lunch or when the streetlights came on. Story 54. Jarts. I remember playing unsupervised beside the pond behind the neighbor's house. I don't recall how old I was when I first started playing there, but when I was 7, one of the kids with us was 3. Story 55. Kids in my neighborhood were on our own to survive each day. Starting at the age of 3 for me, I ventured out into the world, responsible for my own safety until it was time for dinner. After dinner and doing the dishes, I would head out again, returning home when the streetlights turned on. We were like feral animals, but we learned to navigate and survive in our environment. Story 56. Definitely roaming all over the place on bikes at 7 years old. As others have said, the woods seemed safer then, but it probably wasn't. There are strange people everywhere. Story 57. Not my childhood, but when my dad was a child, his father would give him brandy for toothaches. Knowing my grandpa, it was probably some good quality stuff. Story 58. We used to climb high pine trees as kids and pull our lunch up in a little basket with a rope, usually packets of Maggi noodles specifically for the seasoning. If we had fallen, it wouldn't have ended well. Story 59. We dug tunnels in an open field near our house. A few of us in the neighborhood excavated tunnels several feet deep. Some were quite long. We were amazed that they never collapsed and buried any of us. Story 60. Playing outside all day with no supervision. Parents simply said to be home before the streetlights came on and hoped for the best. Story 61. All the kids were rolling around in the back of the station wagon. There were no seatbelts and we were completely unrestrained. Story 62. I walked to school alone from the first day at 6 years old. My mom was a nurse and raised me by herself, so I was home alone quite often for hours, even as a young child. I would go shopping for things at the supermarket next door by myself when I was 4 years old, all as a girl. Story 63. My mom had a friend who struggled with alcoholism. He drove us kids around, including his own child, and would pick us all up for gatherings. He drove frequently because they lived in a rural area. Everyone knew about his situation, but no one really cared. He was addicted to the point where he eventually lost his life. Today, there is much more awareness about alcoholism, and driving under the influence is punished more severely. Story 64. I was 13 and drinking beer with my friend in Golden Gate Park. We met some guys who were at least 21. We got into the car with them and went to their apartment. My friend went into a room with one guy while I played pool with the other. He made me a tequila sunrise and asked what I was doing there and what I was thinking. I was fortunate that he was a gentleman. Story 65. I don't know if it was a Hawaiian thing or just my family thing, but we would regularly leave rice sitting out and eat it until finished, usually the next morning after it was made. Now that I have my own children, I have significant anxiety about food poisoning. When I found out that rice is actually one of the most dangerous foods left out at room temperature for more than a few hours, I was appalled and shocked. Interestingly, I only had food poisoning once that I can remember growing up, but since moving to the mainland 6 years ago, I have had food poisoning at least 5 times. It's strange. Story 66. Scotland. I remember seeing a local farmer driving his excavator through the high street at full speed, the bucket raised to maximum height, with all 3 of his children bouncing around in the bucket. They were my school friends, and I was extremely jealous that they got to do that. Story 67. No helmet ever. Bike riding for miles, parents never knew all day where we were. Creeks and lakes, bears, mountain lions, or the creepy old men. Story 68. As a teenager, I used to ride around on a motorbike wearing only a t-shirt, shorts, and work boots, often with a rifle or shotgun across my legs to shoot rabbits or ducks if I saw them. I had no helmet, license, or registration, and I had no worries. Rural life is different. Story 69. Running around in the woods unsupervised for hours. Biking to the next town and spending all day at the mall eating unhealthy food and buying unnecessary items. Taking random cash jobs around town. Most were small tasks like mowing lawns or weeding gardens, but sometimes it involved stripping wallpaper, using a pressure washer to clean driveways, or the time a few of us decided to join some older individuals harvesting tobacco. Lesson learned: wear gloves. Story 70. Lawn darts. Walking a mile to school. No supervision or seeing a parent for a week or more at a time. Story 71. Playing in the river without our parents knowing we were there. Neither of them could swim, even if they had to try to rescue us. Story 72. Loads of things include chemistry sets, indoor fireworks, air rifles, survival knives with a compass in the handle, exploring abandoned Victorian buildings and factories, swimming in fast-flowing rivers, and jumping into water from the top of weirs or buildings. Most kids' play parks were sketchy at best, with hazards like asbestos and fake cigarettes, and there were no seatbelts in cars. I have plenty more examples. Story 73. We would explore new places in the woods, abandoned houses and factories, sometimes miles away from home. Somehow, we would never get lost. It was as if we had an internal compass. Story 74. I was sent on cross-country flights with multiple layovers alone as a small child in 2nd or 3rd grade. I had no idea how flight schedules worked, what my tickets meant, where my parents were, or why I was traveling alone. I would wander around the airports until I saw a pilot and would grab their sleeve, begging them for help. Anyone could have approached me and said, "Come with me, kid," and I would have gone with them. Story 75. Being driven in the back of my dad's van. surrounded by vacuum cleaners, mops, buckets, and a variety of cleaning supplies. I learned to dodge the vacuum cleaners when turning a corner. Story 76. Driving after drinking was common in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. My parents said they did it all the time when I was a child, born in 1983. Story 77. Going to school in buses that lacked strobe lights, seat belts, stop arms, or crossing arms. Story 78. My friends and I gathered all the firearms from our houses and rode bikes to the debris piles left by old hurricanes. We shot at random objects while wearing headphones for ear protection. Yes, we all have hearing problems. The police never stopped us, and we were never reported or got into any trouble. Fortunately, no one got hurt because, apart from the hearing damage, we all knew how to handle the situation safely. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.